Gregg Wallace has responded to allegations of historical misconduct, saying over the weekend in an Instagram post that complaints have come from a handful of middle-class women of a certain age.
Well, the presenter has stepped back from MasterChef. He did that last week after claims were made by 13 people that he'd made a number of inappropriate sexual comments while working on a range of programmes. Joining us now, a former Celebrity Masterchef contestant, Aggie Mackenzie, took part in the programme back in 2011, the same year as Kirsty Wark, one of the first women to highlight Gregg Wallace's alleged behaviour, and broadcaster Kate Maltby, who has herself gone through a complaints process with a big institution. So, morning to both of you.
Morning.
Morning.
So, Aggie, back in 2011, you were on MasterChef, same year, same series as Kirsty Wark. She said that there had been sexualised jokes, she alleged, during the filming of that show, said the comments were really, really in the wrong place and made people uncomfortable. Did you witness the same stuff?
Yes, I agree with everything Kirsty says. Those jokes weren't actually directed at me, but the jokes were always smutty. They were endless. It was as if Gregg is some sort of dinosaur who just can't read the room and seemed to be allowed to carry on in this way. And I actually can't listen to his voice now. It just kind of triggers something in me. It's horrible, actually.
Do you consider yourself, I mean, one of those people that Gregg is now taking aim at, middle-class women of a certain age?
Oh, again, this illustrates how he just has no insight or understanding of how he behaves. He just can't, he just doesn't get it. He's been allowed to carry on in his own sweet way for many, many years, and it's you know, it's now come to the stage where he's lost his job. He didn't need to lose his job. He could have remedied his behaviour, but I don't think he was actually capable of doing that. It's part of his personality.
I mean, he's partly saying it's your problem and all these middle-aged women because you don't get it.
Yes,
and
he's not going to change.
10 years ago, it was OK to tell these kind of jokes. I mean,
it never was OK. No, not funny at all. I think, as far as I can see, his worst crime was being really, really boring, actually, and having to listen to all this stuff, this nonsense. It was as if he didn't know how to hold a conversation, and so he had to fill up the space with nonsense. I don't think he knew how to talk to anybody, actually.
Carl on Facebook says he's done nothing wrong. It's just his sense of humour that you are not allowed to have these days.
Humour? Hold on. Nothing was ever funny about anything that Gregg Wallace said.
OK, but that's not a crime,
it's
obviously.
Not a crime. Absolutely,
it's not a crime. If you don't like his sense of humour, that's quite different from it being inappropriate or sexualised or making people feel uncomfortable. Kirsty Wark, just to point out, on the same series as you, so she did raise it at the time with an executive at the production company, Shine, and the gist of the reply was, in quotes, almost as if it was some kind of affliction. And if his behaviour became too egregious, he'd be pulled back. Were you aware that complaints had been made?
No, I wasn't aware that complaints had been made, actually. I'm not surprised that complaints were made, but I wasn't aware of it.
And you didn't make a complaint?
I didn't make any complaints. I'm sort of thinking...
But you were uncomfortable at the time?
Uncomfortable... I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable. I was more kind of furious, actually. Furious. That I had to listen to all this nonsense. Yeah.
Is there a reason that you didn't make a complaint about it? You just put up with it?
Well, I suppose I just thought that he's a man in a very powerful position. I could see that he and John Turturro didn't have a relationship. They were very different people. When the camera's off, one went to one corner, the other went to another corner. And I recognised that relationship because I was in the same sort of thing in a programme that I was doing. But, no, I just thought, I'm going to be out of here. I'm not going to have to put up with this any longer. And so it's somebody else's problem. I do think...
All of the younger members of the production team.
Yeah, this is the other thing, isn't it? We all know that the youngest members in a production team are the ones who get paid the least and have got the smallest voices and the least amount of power. And so, you know, I didn't witness him talking to anybody in a way that he took advantage of anyone's sort of lowly position. I'm kind of worried that now it's, you know, I think, you know, his career is toast. And I think that...
We should say he has stepped away. He's not been removed from his job, as you said.
No, but come on, who's going to employ him after this? And
well, and also there's an investigation, and of course, you point out his legal team
I think he
deny
just
the
needs to maybe just keep quiet. I think his position is defenceless, actually, and... but it's sort of turning into a witch hunt, which it didn't need to. It didn't need to.
Kate, you've been in a situation where you've made a complaint against someone who is quite, you know, in a powerful position. Not the BBC, but what do you make of the way that the BBC has handled this?
Well, I think the first thing that it's really important to say is that Gregg Wallace's characterisation of these complaints simply isn't accurate. I mean, we are all now... He's getting the chance to put his narrative across, which, after all, is what powerful men have. I mean, Aggie's already talked about power dynamics. One of the power imbalances in this kind of situation is that Gregg Wallace is someone with a big Instagram following. He's got lots of people hanging on his every word. When he wants to go out and say there are only 13 accusers...
Only 13?
Yeah, I know, right? That will get reported. But in fact, there were 13 accusers in the initial BBC News report. But it's a matter of public record that there have now been multiple more allegations published and more people on social media, on TV shows like yourself coming forward and also attesting to his behaviour.
He also makes his own claim in that video about that there have been many women working on the show who've made their own comments. That he seems to accuse other people of making inappropriate comments themselves. Not the complainants, but in his time at, working on TV. Yeah.
Yes.
Is he claiming that there's one rule for men and one rule for women?
I think he is trying to claim that, but again, I don't think it's going to stick. I mean, we have to remember that Gregg Wallace was one of the most powerful people in all of these TV production, whether you were male or female, he was the star of the show. And he had a responsibility to ensure that other people who had less power and influence than him were treated with respect. He's also, as of course, he's trying to turn this into a class issue. And I think this is also something we hear very commonly, that women who have any kind of other privilege, women who, have... I mean, OK, let's put it more directly. When I made a complaint against a powerful man, like Gregg Wallace, he had a lot of friends in the press and he had a public profile. And one of the attack lines that was used very frequently was, because it is true, that I came from a similar background to a lot of these Tory MPs, and that I had been to private school, which is true, and that I belonged to a class of women who didn't know how lucky we had it because we were privileged in other ways. So, honestly, why should we be complaining about, being... about anything else in life? And I think the thing that's really important and that Gregg Wallace clearly doesn't get is that it's only when you have a modicum of privilege, for example, and this is true, I was able to afford a lawyer. That makes all the difference. You have to have that kind of security in order to be one of the women who actually stands up and makes the complaint.
But just to go back to Susanna's question about the BBC. So this is a powerful man who, it is alleged, used his power in upsetting ways in a TV situation. He is not the first senior BBC person to be accused of doing this. This went across the desk of very senior executives in the BBC who wrote back saying that they were on the case and should be alerted to further actions. 7, 8 years ago, the allegations go back even further than that. What is it, do you think, about big institutions, the BBC is clearly the one here, where somehow they seem repeatedly not to take seriously these allegations or act upon them?
Well, the most obvious point is that they protect the institution first and foremost. But as you say, it is...
All of this is damaging the institution, isn't it?
Eventually. I mean, it is remarkable how much people believe that a cover-up will work. And that, you know, I think a lot of, if you look at the Gregg Wallace case, we have a very classic case of an institution where there are a lot of complaints that were made in an incremental way. And the same person may not have been across all of them, we don't know. But there is, I think, a very strong sense of a group of people in a bureaucracy whose job is to manage this issue right now, the one that's come up this week, and to kind of shut it down, rather than to look in a cohesive picture at the ongoing structural problem. But this absolutely is a problem for big institutions, and it's a problem that because some of these institutions are so huge, there are always people at the top of them, and there are always people on the bottom. And I think if I can just sort of end by telling a story, when I first started campaigning about this, and when I first started as a middle-class woman who's increasingly of a certain age, I wasn't then, for the record, talking about sexual harassment and sexually inappropriate behaviour, the people who got in touch and thanked me were the people who didn't have resources to speak out. And the one that I always remember is the woman who I ended up having quite a long and tearful conversation with on her part, who worked in the canteen of the House of Commons. And she was an ethnic minority woman. She depended on every penny of her job. And she told me that before the Me Too movement, MPs in the House of Commons used to try to stare down the tops of where, I mean, not everyone, to be clear, Ed, not all MPs, but there was a certain type of behaviour that sometimes happened that as a canteen worker in that building, you couldn't complain about. And it took the middle-class women, some of them of a certain age, people who knew how to speak to the press, people who could afford lawyers, to change those behaviours and stop them happening for everyone.
The other thing is, of course, the BBC is making a heck of a lot of money out of MasterChef. It's a huge money earner, isn't it?
Aggie, thank you very much. Kate, thank you so much. We do have a list of responses from those involved in this discussion. So the first one is from Gregg Wallace's lawyers, who said it is entirely false that he engages in behaviour of a sexually harassing nature. Meanwhile, BBC spokesperson said it would be wrong to report the BBC has done nothing if or when matters have been raised with us, not least because it is already being widely reported. There were interventions in both 2017 and 2018 where action was taken.
And a spokesman for the production company Banjay said, whilst these complainants have not raised the allegations directly with our show producers or parent company, Banjay UK, we feel that it is appropriate to conduct an immediate external review to fully and impartially investigate. Banjay's UK's duty of care to staff is always a priority.
Thank you both very much indeed.